3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to DBAD, the Don't Be a Dickhead podcast. Here we are for episode 10 with me, John Gilbert.
Me, Iain Thompson.
And me, Alex King.
There we go.
So today we're going to be talking about
Ding,
neighbours.
ding, 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 ding. Neighbours.
Yeah, that one. That's the one.
No, I'm kind of disappointed that it took us 5 seconds into the podcast before making a joke about the Ramsey Street version of Neighbours. Even our online community seemed to understand that. I was a bit disappointed actually that there was no Harold Bishop jokes. Do they still do Neighbours? Is it still a thing?
I think
Is
so,
it?
yeah. And Home and Aware, isn't it?
Surely
Is it
not.
not? I thought it was.
Well, they probably don't do it right now because neighbours are all just socially isolated down Ramsey Street, banging on each other's walls and things.
yeah.
But yeah, did you ever watch it?
I
Mum
loved it.
used to
I
always
loved it.
Watch it. You'd be on in the background.
I watched it I'm pretty sure I watched it from not far off the beginning of it.
Yeah, with Madge Bishop, Harold Bishop,
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Joe Mangle. They're the old characters.
Yeah. I don't think Joe Mangle was in from the very
I'm more
beginning.
from the Toadfish generation.
Yeah, Paul Robinson was in from the very beginning. And you obviously imagine Harold. I'm sort of struggling to remember that far
Do
back, to be
you
honest.
still get excited when you're watching something and you realise it's somebody who used to be in Neighbours who's done really well for themselves? I don't mean like Kylie and Jason and so on, but there's quite a few of them. Sally
Guy
watches a
Pearce.
show called Chicago Fire, which has got Billy in it.
Yeah, he's done quite a bit.
Is he?
Yeah. Didn't he do House as well?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
House with the guy from Blackadder in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're not talking about Neighbours. We're talking about neighbours and the kind of dickheadery that we see in here there. So I've been doing a little bit of research into this, and there are lots and lots of articles that define the different types of annoying neighbour that we have. None of this appears to be based on scientific research, by the way, like some of our podcasts, but they've categorised them, and I wonder if any of our community have identified with these, because the first one is the idea of the noisy neighbour. And I think some people have come forward with some suggestions of neighbourhood dickheadery that would fall into those categories.
Yeah, so Gary Pearson, he has brought up playing music too loud and also skipping music before the end of the song.
That's a good point. Just to let the audience know as well, this is Gary Pearson of the Brownie fame, who ate all the brownies on the drunken night out from a previous episode. But anyway, that is a good point of skipping, because obviously noisy neighbours is always going to come up. That's a given. We almost don't need to talk about that. Playing music too loud. Yeah. Gary's got a reasonably new baby, I know, so... he's not a baby anymore. He's almost a toddler, actually. But it's still, Gary
Still
will remember back to the
reasonably new.
days. Yeah, that he will. That they would struggle to get him to sleep if the neighbours were noisy. Okay, done. But skipping tracks is an excellent one, because then it suggests that you're really actually quite into the music that they're playing next door, or you've had to get into it
You've
in
got
order
no
to
choice
not kill them.
sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so then you're annoyed when they won't listen to a full song. I mean, that annoys me at any point, whether it's a neighbour or not.
What, when someone skips a song?
Yeah.
I've got to admit that I am a track skipper, particularly when I've had a drink and I just want to move on to the next one quite quickly, and to the point where if it's just on Spotify, I will just call out, "Imagine there was a good mix here," and then I'll just press play on the next song, and there is no mix whatsoever.
If it's like right at the end of the song and the song doesn't particularly have a banging outro, then fair enough. But I mean, not if it's like, oh, well, let's listen to the first verse and chorus and then we'll just skip it.
Yeah,
I
it
just
annoys
imagine
me.
Gary's household though, where there he is, his partner, and he's what would you call it? His reasonably new baby. They're embracing the noise from next door, but then he's banging on the wall, going, "There was still another 1 minute 40 seconds of that Queen track." And,
So we might have like an absolutely banging Rage Against the Machine outro.
Yeah, I suppose he has got a point. But, I mean, that's one way of looking at it. I've got a noisy neighbour at the moment, which I know sounds really uninteresting. And maybe it is, but it's a different kind of noisy neighbour. It's not because he plays loud music and so on, but he's an octogenarian, and I don't think he's very well at the moment. But what he appears to do every single night, through the night, is watch Star Wars films at the top of the volume. And my bedroom, I mean, it's a detached house, but where my head is and our front window is not too far away from his bedroom, and I can just hear lightsabers and deep voices all night. Unless he is practicing the ways of the Force, or maybe even the dark side, over the cover of night, I suppose it's possible. But it's just such a bizarre thing. And it's not the kind of thing you could go and complain about, really. I mean, we wouldn't. And I think, actually, I mean, I did put, like, notes through his door saying, if there's anything we can help you with, let us know, because we're not supposed to go and look after him. And he has carers coming and going. But, yeah, it's, like, not the noisy neighbour that I ever expected to have.
So is this, like, all through the night, then, or is it just sort of...
Yeah.
Right.
All through the night.
How weird.
Yeah.
Does he make much noise in the daytime?
No.
Maybe he's nocturnal.
A vampire. He's a massive Star Wars fan vampire.
Maybe.
Yeah, he may well just wake up in the night time and, you know, enjoy some stuff. Can you hear, like, the words and things like that, or is it just the music generally that you hear? Because maybe he's just a big John Williams fan.
No, it's more the lightsabers. So I just hear zoom, zoom, zoom. One night, I'm not quite sure what the film he was watching was, but it appeared to be a 10-hour-long film about a man that was trapped in his house and couldn't get out. Because all I could hear was he just like, anybody there? Anybody? And coincidentally, in the movie, he had a guy called John who lived next door to him. I don't know if it's one of the new Home Alone versions or something like that. But anyway, it was all quiet the next day, so maybe they haven't made the sequel yet.
Brilliant. Okay, that's fair enough. You see, I'm well known as a very, very good neighbour.
You're quite proud of that, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been commended by quite a few of my neighbours for being nice and quiet, and they barely notice that I'm there. So my previous neighbour, who lives to the right of me, as you stood looking out of my house proudly, then the previous two neighbours I've been good friends with, and they've said to me what an excellent neighbour I've been when they've left. One of them even invited me round to his house for a drink to ask me if it was okay if they moved, because they said you've just been such a good neighbour. And then for the 2 months after they moved, then they sent me estate agent postings trying to persuade me to move in next door to them at their new house because their neighbours moved out. And so that they suggested that I move in there because we got on very well. And they were good neighbours, I was a good neighbour, and it worked really, really nicely. So they wanted to move the community.
That sounds like a really excellent example of when good neighbours become good friends.
Good neighboury.
I'm sure you've told me that story quite recently, Ian. I don't know if you mentioned it on the last podcast, actually.
I think, actually, Alex, I mentioned it on the prep work for this show.
You see, Alex is relatively new to the DBAD podcast. You have to have two minds now. You have to have your on-air and off-air mind, so you can remember when you're repeating yourself or when you're not. Like, one of the things you have to be really careful of is imagine that you made like an off-air ad-lib funny joke. Then when you try and recreate that on air, it's just never going to be the same again.
Yeah, that's the problem.
What other noisy neighbourhood examples of our community come up with?
Well, Molly Brown has put on Facebook about windchimes, basically. Windchime. I mean, and what her actual words were also. Because she's written about allowing weeds and overgrown bushes to grow into your garden and whatnot. That's fair enough. And also wind chimes. What purpose do they serve? And I mean, that's perfectly fair if you ask me. I don't get them at all. What's the point? It's just annoying other people.
I think they're relaxing.
Yeah.
Is that what they're for? Or is it to tell you if it's windy?
I think they used to be used for that, didn't they? But I think now it's more of like a decorative... nice to have in the garden. We've got quite a lot in our garden. I wouldn't say they were overly loud. It's not like a garden just full of wind chimes, but we've got quite a few.
You don't have a neighbour called Molly Brown, do you? Who just keeps losing her shit at your wind chimes.
You see, when you say you have quite a lot, I mean, I'm could verge on understanding having one, but you see you've got quite a lot. Quite a lot suggests you don't even know how many you've got. Like, it's not just 2 or 3. Like, there's just fucking loads. They're just all over. You've lost count.
The
You're
nice little
hoarding them.
gentle ones that make a nice little noise in the breeze. Not like...
As opposed to what?
No, because you can get the solid wooden ones, can't you, where they like make a racket. I see the point of those ones, but I was nice little... I actually got one right here. You hear it?
You're quite a connoisseur. You see, the problem is we live on an estuary, don't we? And so it's pretty much always windy. So it's not like people need them to find out when it's windy. It's windy, I'm telling you.
Well, I think we've established that that's not the reason for having wind chimes.
No.
Otherwise, you could just have like a plastic bag in your yard, and you can look out the window, and if it's blowing around, you know it's windy.
Yeah, cage it up, obviously, so it can't escape.
Not quite as sophisticated as the wind chime system. No, I guess some people must like the sound of it, and others don't. It's a bit like me and the sound of my own voice.
So fortunately, we've made a podcast.
Well, that's it. That's absolutely. Some people, say, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I hate the sound of my voice." And I'm like, well, I know my voice sounds terrible, but it's the words that are coming out of it that I'm interested in.
What kind of neighbour are you two?
Well, I've not lived on my own yet, have I? So I guess just I'm a respectful neighbour. Apart from all of the wind chimes, obviously. I would say I'm a respectful neighbour that, like, when I'm listening to the TV, if I notice it's quite loud and it's quite late, I will think of the neighbours and turn it down. I'm quite considerate like that.
Have you had the same neighbours for ages? Like when I was growing up, then we had the same neighbours for absolutely forever.
No, not in where I live now, but before that we had the same neighbours for quite a long time. So I don't really know the neighbours that I've got now. And I think that's another thing, like nowadays, I feel like a lot of people don't actually make like bonds with the neighbours like people used to. So I think that creates more of an issue, because if you have got a problem, you're probably less likely to say something about it if you're not friends with them.
So you need a better community. You know what I like doing? At Christmas time, I buy some little cards, and I'll wait until about 10, 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and then I'll write all my neighbours' cards and take them round and post them through their door, so they've got no comeback. So then I'm the better neighbour, and they feel bad about themselves. They've got no time to come back because it's Christmas Day then, and they're preoccupied with other stuff. And if they send me it after Christmas, it looks like an afterthought. So I win.
But I feel like sending one on Christmas Eve is an afterthought.
I think it's psychotic.
I feel like you've got
I think you understand the motive behind that.
So there we go.
What about you, John?
Are you a good neighbour, John?
Right, okay. So, yes, I believe I am a good neighbour now. I bonded with my neighbours only a couple of days ago when we used our garage roof as a rooftop bar, and the neighbours were drinking in their garden and were waving at us, much to their own amusement. I did feel a little bit self-conscious. I was the first person of our neighbourhood to drop the "Can I help you during the coronavirus" card if you need me to do any shops or anything. Got lots of text messages back from people I've never met before, thanking me for it. So I feel like, I am a good neighbour. Here comes the but. The but is I do think that I'm making up for, I suppose, dickheadery of the past. As a teenager, I was a terrible neighbour, and I don't think ever without provocation, but when provoked, I would rise to that. And I grew up in part of East Hull, which was kind of a bit rough, but not the roughest. But it certainly had a lot of characters around, and we had our fair share of feuds over the years, I think it's fair to say.
I'll tell you what, actually, like thinking back in the past, when I hadn't been living here too long, so it must have been around 2004, 5, maybe something like that. I moved in 2004, and I didn't know many of the neighbours that well. And back then as well, because I wasn't used to owning my own house particularly, I sometimes used to forget to lock the front door. Anyway, one morning I went to bed and got up quite early in the morning because I was working in a school over the river. And so I got up at about 6 o'clock or something, came downstairs, and the door was slightly ajar. And I thought, have I forgotten to lock that or something? I didn't think anything of it, just went and shut the door. Went back to walk into the back room, and Totem, my dog, he walked into the back room before me and he just froze and just like, ow, did a massive big like howl bark. And I walked into the back room and looked at what he was looking at, and on the floor in my kitchen there was a sleeping man, and it didn't look like he'd had a wash in a long time, and he was bleeding slightly, and so now. Loads of people say I would have been really, really scared and reacted badly to this, but I actually thought it was one of my friends. I won't tell you which friend it is because, as I say, he didn't look like he'd washed in a long time and he was bleeding. But I instantly thought it was one of my friends, so I wasn't worried. So I walked through to the kitchen, realised it wasn't my friend, but still reasonably calmly, just sort of tapped him and said, mate, you're in the wrong house, you're going to have to go. And he like woke up slightly and spoke to me, and I didn't really understand what he was saying, because he was slurring his words a lot and he couldn't really get his words out particularly. And I said, it's not your house, mate, you're going to have to go. And he just went, oh, okay. And then went back to sleep. At which point I had to tap him slightly harder and say, no, come on, mate. And I sort of helped him up and said, like, you're going to have to go now, I'm afraid. You're going to have to, it's not your house, sorry, you're going to have to go. Walked him to the front door and ushered him outside. And then watched him as he went. And then suddenly realised, oh, God, what if the neighbours see me? I'm stood here. It's about 6:10 in the morning. I'm in only my dressing gown. There was a reasonably short dressing gown, so it was quite clear I didn't have anything on underneath. I was just stood in my dressing gown, basically throwing a homeless person out of my house after what they would presume was just me like taking advantage of him for the evening or something. So there we go.
Wow.
That's great.
Wow. Yeah, I've been a dickhead neighbour in the past, particularly when we were teenagers. There was times when I didn't have a lot of adult supervision, I think it's fair to say. So we did have the parties and so on. And we had a horrible man who lived next door who was horrible to his family, and particularly horrible to his wife, because you could hear them through the walls. And we had a bit of an ongoing feud with him. And he started a rumour that we were drug dealers. And to be fair, there were a lot of people coming and going from our house. Some of them were drug dealers, but we were not dealing drugs from the house. That's just ridiculous. But he would go down the pub and tell everybody this. And this got back to us via a mate's dad, who says, oh, he's been going saying that John's house is running all drugs and all this stuff. So my retaliation was I started a rumour that he was a serial child killer, and that he had a dungeon under his house that he trapped and murdered children in. So that didn't go around the pubs, but it did go around the children in the neighbourhood who were like, you don't go near that house, he's a murderer, he'll kill you. So so we kind of slayed each other in that sense. And basically there's a bit of a pattern emerging here of me being wronged. Now, I do like to draw the distinction on the DBAD podcast that the person that I have been in the past is not the person I am today. I was certainly a lot more interested in the past and a lot more sensible today. But another of my neighbours, the guy who lived across the road from us, I can't actually remember what he did to wrong us. It was probably quite a minor offence because he, in my mind, got quite a minor set of repercussions. But me and my mates, we'd recently watched the movie The Children of the Corn, which is, I think it's about aliens or something. It's a Stephen King thing, and basically about these creepy kids. So we decided that what we would do is every time we saw this man, you would stop whatever you were doing and just stare at him, right? So if you were walking down the street and he was walking, you would just stop dead and just stare at him. He was a policeman as well. We called him the fake policeman because he was a detective. It was just like, you don't have a police hat, he's not a real policeman. And my mum would go, he is a real policeman. He's a detective. They don't wear a police uniform. Not a real policeman. Whatever. But we carried this on for months. And like all my mates like from the neighbourhood all got in on it, and this guy, whenever if he was walking to the pub or to the shop or whatever, you would just stop dead and just stare at him. And we even got to the point where if we saw him come in, we would rush outside the house and all wait on the front door and just stare at him as he went to his house. And then he'd go in looking real self-conscious, and then we'd just piss ourselves laughing and go back inside. Then one day he clearly had enough, as there was three of us just stood on my doorstep just watching him going into his house, and he started to go into his, and then he just stopped and turned around and kind of marched up to us, and we was like, shit, and he just kind of went up and went, what is it? And then my mate just went, we're just watching the birds above your house, like playing it real innocent, and there was some birds just flying around his house. And he seemed really embarrassed about it, and he was like, oh, sorry. He said, I thought it was me you were staring at, and just kind of laughed it off. And so we stopped doing it from that point onwards, because we thought, well, that's it. It's not going to. We don't want him to know that we were doing it. We just want him to feel like he was just going a bit mad, so we left him to it. He wasn't a very nice man. He was having an affair, and this was the scandal at the time because this was the mid-90s. He was having an affair with a woman he'd met on the internet. And that was the thing that made it a talking point. The internet? He'd met somebody on the internet.
How did you know he was having this affair?
Well,
rumours.
Rumours. It could have been. I don't know. Yeah. Just rumours.
It might not even be correct.
No. So,
I like the thought of maybe when it first started happening, he used to tell his wife that whenever he came home from work, the local kids gave him a guard of honour. I mean, they all rushed from their houses. It's like in 2020 when everyone will go outside and clap for the NHS, only they come out and they give me just a silent guard of honour down the street.
Because they know of the important detective work that I do. Yeah, it could be. But so I just need to point out that I know that story makes me a complete and utter dickhead. But I thought I'd share it.
This is what this podcast's all
John's
about.
therapy sessions.
Yeah. What else have people been saying on the internet?
So Lisa Baxter says, not using power tools, jet washers, strimmers, lawnmowers interchangeably, and then it spits in bold, all day when it's nice and sunny. Save it for a dull or cold day and let us enjoy our gardens in peace on sunny days, as it's literally all we can do right now. So much more important for our mental health than ever that we enjoy our garden, stroke peace, stroke birds singing, and not relentless racket, please.
But it's so much nicer to do your work on a sunny day.
It is nicer. It does bother me that I feel like, and I think that's people do obviously wait for it to be sunny because they know it's not going to rain, so they can mow the grass and what have you. But that does bother me when you're just trying to relax and sunbathe and.
I suppose if it goes on all day, then it is pretty annoying. But also, isn't the sound of like a distant strimmer or some garden work going on, is that not one of the sounds of summer? One of the sounds of sitting in your garden?
I'd say what it's better than a bloody wind chime.
Yeah.
I much prefer to hear an engine. Okay. And Lisa's post, which I saw over the Easter weekend, did actually modify my behaviour because I didn't cut my grass on Easter Sunday when it was nice and sunny. I waited until the dull Easter Monday and then did it in the mid-afternoon, so it did make me less of a dickhead. It's a shame Lisa wasn't there to influence me when I was just staring at my neighbour or making up rumours, but these are different times.
I was clearing my front yard. I've just got a very small front yard in front of my house, and I was clearing that, was it yesterday or the day before? But it involved me scraping a spade across concrete quite a lot, and I did think this is going to go through some people and they're going to literally hate me.
It didn't stop you
I
from
didn't stop.
acting like a dickhead.
Absolutely not.
Look at Christmas Eve card bastard scraping his spade. The guy who's self-proclaimed such a good neighbour that people want him to follow him around. None of the examples you've given have illustrated that point particularly well. I do have a form of dickheadery in my current neighbourhood, which is I'm very guilty of eyesores outside the house, which I do for my own amusement. We've got like a 6'5" water fountain just in our front lawn, which is really incongruous with the rest of the neighbourhood. But
does it work?
It does. I switched it off earlier on today. I need to top the water up a bit because what happens to my water fountain, and I must admit this is accidental dickheadery. We've got 5 crows that live in my back garden, which is fine. But what they do is they then go around the front and they drink and wash themselves in my water fountain. And one of the most charming things I've had to do recently was early one morning I spotted a pigeon that didn't look too well. And then later on that day, I had to fish the dismembered carcass of the pigeon out of my water fountain because the crows had torn it apart. And they dipped it in the water to make it easier for them to eat, which I thought was quite ingenious. But that was not a fun thing to... that said,
so they drink and wash out of this this fountain.
Yeah, and it's a problem for me.
But then they also use it to kill people.
Don't you do that in your bath?
No, I mean, this isn't Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, crows are not known for their hygienic qualities, are they?
Wow.
And then as as you guys know, I also have a life-size lion and alligator on the front as well. But I don't know if I call that an eyesore.
No, I
It's just
love
something
those.
for the
I think
kids
they're great.
to point them.
Yeah.
I do really want to go full giraffe, but I don't know if now's the time to do it.
Yeah, giraffe
Yeah.
would be good. I imagine they're quite expensive, the giraffes.
That's the reason not to do it. Let's understand the full extent of this financial meltdown that we're all
I think
living
that's
through now
wise.
before I go and buy a giraffe. That's like, yeah, if you want to quote my only wise words from this entire podcast episode, that might be the one. The other thing I've noticed about neighbours is I had bad neighbours as a child who wouldn't let you have your football back if it went over the fence. Like, we had an old guy, and I'd say this is you can choose, right? You can choose whether or not you want to have a positive relationship with children in your neighbourhood or not. That came out wrong. But basically what I mean is, like, where I live now, so my kids are roughly the same age as I was when I moved to a new house. And if my kids play in the garden and the ball goes over, they'll chuck it back over. They're always friendly.
Yeah.
They grow stuff in the garden. They take it round. They've got chickens, which is controversial one, but they give us some of the eggs and so on. Great relationship with the neighbours. When I lived in East Hull, our ball went over the garden pretty much the first day we moved in, and he just shouted at us and then popped the ball. And then anything that went over, he just would take the balls away, and we'd have to wait for him to go out, and then went to his next door neighbour, who was a nice man, who would go around the back and then I was going to say relieve him of his balls, but give us our balls back. I don't really know where I was going there, but just give us the balls back. And so I know which one of those old guys, if they really needed help or anything, I know which one I'd go to help and which one I wouldn't. And that guy started that. So I started a rumour about him. No, I didn't really, but...
Yeah, I've had that experience of people like popping your balls, but that might be because obviously we used to always be in the 10-foot playing, whereas I don't think that really happens as much
A
now.
10-foot for anyone outside of Hull is an alleyway.
is it a ginnel? Or
Ginnel, maybe.
maybe it's both of those,
yeah.
actually. I've had some altercations in 10-foots with neighbours over the years, and there was one that was something that happened to me in my childhood that I'd repressed, and came back to me a few weeks ago when the electrician came to the office to fit the lights on our signs, and I knew him from school, and it was like pretty much the first thing he said to me is, "Do you remember Psycho Spade Man?" Right? And I had repressed Psycho Spade Man. But Psycho Spade Man was one of our neighbours who one day we were walking down the 10-foot who just come bursting out the back accusing us of breaking into his garage and was swinging a spade at us, and all my mates ran apart from me, who wouldn't run from Psycho Spade Man. In fact, I moved towards him because I needed to make him sure that he understood that we weren't the kind of kids that would break into garages, which we absolutely weren't. We were geeks. We wouldn't have done anything like that. But he just wasn't having it. He'd go, "No, I've seen you." And I was like, "You cannot possibly have seen me because I never did it." And then another neighbour came out and pointed at me and went, "Yeah, he's one of them." But it wasn't me. But I was more prepared to have had my skull caved in by his spade than to be accused of a crime I had not committed. And I don't think he knew what to do because he just expected us to run off. And because I didn't run off, he was a bit like, "Well, what do I do? Just beat up this 12-year-old kid?" So,
With
but
a spade.
I wasn't backing down. Psycho Spade
He
Man.
must have thought to himself, like, "I can't beat up this kid. I'll forever be known as Psycho Spade Man." Little did he know that he would be called that anyway. So, I mean, he might as well have had the joy of beating you up.
But as an adult now, I understand that something had happened to him that had upset him, had threatened his security and so on. But you don't just go out and blame the first group of kids that you come across. I mean, and he deserves to be called Psycho Spade Man. Had he beaten me up, he might have been Killer Spade Man or something like that. I don't know. I don't think my skull's particularly well designed for spades. What a dickhead. That's an absolute dickhead. Just flying off the handle at kids because you're upset with other kids. Oh, I don't know, I'll just blame some other kid. That is absolute
I agree.
dickheadery.
Kiddist.
Yeah, it is kiddist.
Dickheadery. I love the fact, though, that all the way through your childhood, and it sounds like an 80s teen semi-horror childhood where you make up fun names for all of the neighbours.
We also had Psycho Baseball Batman.
Okay,
Now,
I
Psycho
can imagine.
Baseball Batman went mad at us for standing outside the bit of the fence which was beside our house because we were waiting to break into the back of their garden. I was like, "No, I live there, mate." and he come out with a baseball bat and did that thing, where blokes do it when they like make their neck click like that.
Yeah.
And I was a bit older then. I was probably about 15.
That's very 80s teen horror as well, doing that.
Yeah, Psycho Baseball Batman. Yeah, I don't live around there anymore. I live like with nice people now who just maybe listen to Star Wars a bit too much.
Maybe he had one of those things that you put in the palm of your hand and you can make it click then. A good sound effect.
But yeah, he had a clicker in one hand and a baseball. No, because he had two hands on the baseball bat. So he didn't use the baseball bat. Like Psycho Spade Man was actually swinging the spade at us. Psycho Baseball Batman didn't. But he has no more respect from me for the fact of that. So yeah, don't just have a go at kids just because they happen to be walking past your house. That is not the same as them committing a crime. If anybody did that to my kids, then I would feel like I would deal with that situation.
Okay.
I'll drown them in my fountain, leave them for the crows to pick apart the next morning. Anything about our neighbours that we want to get off our chest while we can? Somebody, not me, preferably.
When I first got Totem, my dog, it wasn't just when I first got him, all the way through his life, he was very naughty. And my opposite neighbours used to tease me by virtue of the fact that they train dogs for a living, and they used to park their van right outside my house that advertised dog training sessions for naughty dogs. I always wonder whether they used to park it outside my house on purpose. He once jumped out of a first-story window, but that's a story for another podcast.
Oh, right then. On that teaser, shall we wrap up the show?
Yeah. Don't forget to go on iTunes, everyone, or whichever place you get your podcast from. Like, subscribe, and rate us.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. We're getting some really good feedback on Facebook, but if you can give it to us on the podcast clients, more people will learn about the DBAD movement and feel that they've got the tools they need to help us reduce dickheadery. So thank you everybody for listening. I've been John Gilbert.
I've been Iain Thompson.
I've been Alex King.
And remember,
Don't be a dickhead.